Welcome to Sabbath Collective, a community of people interested in celebrating the Sabbath and pursuing God through a Hebraic worldview of the Bible. So, we're in a series now concerning the importance of the Hebrew language of Scripture in its linguistic and cultural context. Tonight, we ask the question, what does belief look like? Peter Rollins he's a parabolist, and he tells a parable of a man who was walking through a deep forest when he happened upon an injured fox that could not walk. As he wondered how the fox was still alive, he saw a tiger approach the lame animal with fresh game in its mouth. The tiger ate its fill and then left the rest of the meat for the fox. The next day, the man returned to the same spot to see if this miracle would be repeated. And sure enough, the same tiger eventually appeared and once more fed the fox. The man was so impressed by what he witnessed that he gave thanks to God. And he said to himself, "Hey, Rai, I shall learn from this fox by trusting that the Lord will provide me with all that I need." So let's put a pin in that. In other words, he made a doctrine from how he personally related to what he saw with the tiger and the fox, okay? So let's jump back into the parable. And so he found a quiet spot in the forest and waited for many days. But his needs were not met. When he was almost at death's door, he shouted out to God in anger, saying, "I have shown undying faith, and yet you haven't met my needs." But then, in an instant, silence befell the forest, and a voice from heaven could be heard. "O you who are in the path of error, open your eyes to the truth. I do not want you to imitate the disabled fox, but rather to follow the example of the tiger." Peter Rollins is the best. And herein lies the problem with believing doctrines based on how we interpret things. There's always room for our own agendas misinterpreting. Hey, Nicole in Costa Rica, great to have you. Hey, Edwin. So let's take a look at 1 John 5:1. It says, "Everyone who believes," and that's the Greek word pisteo, "that Yeshua is the Messiah has God as his Father." Now, let me jump off for a second. This is a Hebraic way of writing, which is pretty much the same thought. So these two thoughts together are pretty much saying the same thing. Those who believe Yeshua is the Messiah also have Adonai as their Father. John uses the verb pisteo. It is translated believe or faith in most of our Bibles. Let's continue on with this verse then. "And everyone who loves a father loves his offspring too." So this is John saying the same thing two different ways. Love for Adonai will manifest itself as belief. Now stay tracking with me. And belief looks like love for the offspring or the Messiah. And here's the point of this. You do not believe in a bubble. It's impossible. So in other words, hey, Andre, great to see you. Hope everything's going well for you, and we're praying for you. So here's the point of this. You don't do belief in a bubble. Belief has to be expressed in this world towards others. In other words, what John is saying in this text is when there's belief, there's love. Love is an action. So you don't just have these tenets of faith and you lock yourself in your closet and say, okay, I'm believing the right thing, so therefore I'm cool. That's not belief. Belief is expressed in this world towards others. John is not saying if you hold a cognitive proposition about Yeshua. He, in fact, is saying something quite different. He's saying if you actively enter into the Hebraic worldview that is expressed in the life of the Messiah by doing. So the Greek word used in scriptures, which is often translated belief or faith. Hey, Carlos, great to have you with us too. I think this is Carlos's first time joining us, so it's good to have you, Carlos. Hey, Barika. Good to see you. Hi, Carmen. The exact meaning Ryan is saying of pistis is one of those words in the New Testament that is constantly debated. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Nandi, great to see you, honey. Hope you're doing well and love you. So the Greek word used in scriptures is often translated believe, faith, trust. It is the verb pistio, and most Western pastors or even Western scholars, Christian scholars, translate this to be a thing one believes is true. And they have their belief systems, right? You want to go to some church, you check out their website, what do you inevitably find on that website? Things we believe. And what they're saying, usually with this, is these are the things that you believe that make you a Christian. And Western, quote, Christians take oftentimes these things you must believe lists even further. And they connect the you must believe with you must also be against their big sins. And then they throw in what they also think the government should make laws about concerning these, quote, big sins. Now, here's the practicality of that, of these kinds of things that you're told to believe. Interestingly enough, with what most Western Christians have on their sin list, is gluttony is not even on the radar of that big sin list, nor is pride that manifests in a kind of misogynistic authoritarian leadership style, nor is sexism, nor is any kind of social justice like keeping families together or racism or protecting the planet against greed that is destroying it, nor even is adultery. Well, maybe kind of, but... And why is that? Because gluttony and pride and adultery are rampant among pastors and the people sitting in their churches' seats. And things like the environment or children kept in cages or people of color being killed in the streets don't really affect them so much. They say the Bible says it, I believe it, that settles it. The Western church guards its truth with the weapon of its own interpretation. And all of that way of thinking is a Greek Western worldview. It's what Western Christianity is rooted in. And listen, if you haven't figured this out on a personal level yet, practically speaking, it does not work. It can't. George MacDonald says, do you love your faith so little that you have never battled a single fear lest your faith should not be true? Where there are no doubts, no questions, no perplexities, there can be no growth. I agree. Certitude or a mental assent towards something as an empirical fact has been confused with true belief and faith. Certitude gives us a sense of control, of power, of privilege, until it doesn't work. If we ascribe to a belief system that is made up of lists, and one of those things proves unreliable, then our belief system crumbles like a house of cards, because our faith is built on certitudes. Western Christianity's belief system is a disaster waiting to happen. All it takes to tear down that kind of faith is a better argument or a life event that doesn't fit into the mold. And I know some of us, in fact, most of us have had that. Peter Enns has a really great book out called The Sin of Certainty, Why God Desires Our Trust More Than Our Correct Beliefs. And it's actually out of his own journey from certainty to trust. And he says this, certainty leads to a preoccupation with correct thinking, making sure familiar beliefs are defended and supported at all costs. It reduces the life of faith to sentry duty, scanning the horizon to fend off incorrect thinking in ourselves and others. A faith like that is stressful and tedious to maintain. Moving towards different ways of thinking, even trying it on for a while to see how it fits, is perceived as a compromise to faith, or as giving up on faith altogether. He says when we grab hold of correct thinking for dear life, when we refuse to let go because we think that doing so means letting go of God, when we dig in our heels and stay firmly planted, even when we sense that we need to let go and move on, at that point we are trusting our thoughts rather than God. We have turned away from God's invitation to trust in order to cling to an idol. And again, that's from the book Sin of Certainty. So let me ask you this. How is waving the towel right says? That's how we used to get it back in the day. Let me ask you this. How is the religion of certitude in doctrines hurtful to our world and hurtful to us as personally as followers of Yeshua? Let me see your thoughts on that. Yeah, it is hard being in Pentecostal church for so many years, Rebecca, because most denominations are all about those lists of tenets. Believe this, don't believe that. So how are those kind of definitions of belief being ascribing to doctrines hurtful to our world and hurtful to us as individual followers of Yeshua? It is not how ancient Hebraic faith was lived out. Real faith challenges every assumption and is not fearful to do so. Hebraically, belief or faith is not ascribing to some list of absolutes with certitude. It is a verb, the act of believing into. You know how we have the phrase, I'm leaning into this? That's the concept of real faith, the Hebraic concept of faith. It's believing into something. I believe as a result of the paradigm represented to me through Yeshua. And because of that view, my world changes. And my behavior reflects that change. In other words, you can see my belief through my actions. Now, as you know, in Hebrew language, everything is concrete and tactile. Rebecca's saying, I think that that strict belief doesn't leave room to question. Absolutely. Nandi says thoughts on transgender people. Absolutely. People are so afraid to ask any questions, Nandi. And again, they ascribe the list of certitudes. Rebecca says, if you question anything, either about yourself or other people or God, you're sinning. Your faith is weak. Absolutely. Barika is saying when things don't work out even when you think they should. Exactly. Nicole's saying because these thoughts or guidelines put everyone in a box. Yes. So these are things that are hurtful to us as followers. In other words, if somebody comes to me and says, you can't be a follower of Yeshua unless you stop eating avocados, I'm not even going to get to know Yeshua because I love avocados, right? And this is what we do to people with these tenets of faith that we talk about. Rai says because it puts all of our faith in a defined system, then we become more worried about protection. Yes, yes, yes. Which is always what we fall into, that protection of the system. Anandi's saying when our personal lives don't line up, it makes us question our standard with God altogether. Absolutely. Y'all know this, and I know I'm preaching to the choir. But when we're sharing that love in the world, these are exactly the things that they're feeling in their life. In the Hebrew language, everything is concrete and tactile. So let's look at the Hebrew word aman, which means believe. And what happens is the words that we read in the Greek, we can kind of translate into the Hebrew because of the LXX, which is very helpful to us. So how the Greek-speaking followers of God translated the Old Testament, the Tanakh, that's how we can kind of make connections. And the word aman is connected to the Greek word pistis, for believe or for faith. So when we take a look at that aman, again reading right to left, we see it's aleph, mem, and nun is the ancient pictographs. Now, as you know, before there were Hebrew letters, they drew pictures. I kind of like those days. And each letter has a meaning. So the word for aman is a very interesting word. Aman is Hebrew for believe. And the very first time we see the word for believe, aman, in scriptures, we see it speaking of Abraham in Genesis 15:6. It says he believed, aman, in Adonai, and he credited it to him as righteousness. So, wow, I would love for God to say, I'm righteous. So what did Abraham do where it said he believed? How did Abraham believe? Well, let's look at the meaning of it in the Hebrew pictographs. So let's look closely at this card. I know it's a little bit small here. We're going to try to kind of zero in on it. But we're going to take a look at these three letters and look at their meanings. Aleph, which means strong, powerful leader, and it is the picture of an ox head. And it means a power from work. We can actually look at these pictures and kind of figure out the meaning of the letter, right? So Aleph is first. Mem is water or blood, and it's the picture of waves of water. And it can mean mighty, and also the abstract can mean chaos, because water can be chaotic. Water is needed for life. We are actually born out of it from our mother's womb. We need to drink it or we die. And yet, if we are submersed in it for too long, we cannot survive. We'll drown. Water is vital for life, and yet water is dangerous. It's unmanageable. It's uncontrollable, and water is fluid. And then there's nun. Nun, the letter nun, is a picture of a sprouting seed or sperm. And this is how we spell this word, aman, because there's no vowels, as you know. It's aman. So nun is a picture of sprouting seed or sperm, and it means continuation, perpetuation, or offspring. So the definition of the word is the life force that continues. That's the definition, the Hebrew definition of the word for believe, aman. The word believe, aman, is defined by the totality of these three letters' meanings. So let's listen to all the three letters meaning, and we're going to kind of compile, we're going to download all these meanings, and that's what to believe means. Believe means a strength, an uncontrollable, mighty, life-sustaining, fluid power, the continuation of life, the life force that continues. The verb aman is used 110 times in the Tanakh, which is the Old Testament. The Hebrew concept of the word aman, it means to be firm or be grounded, to confirm, to affirm, to make steady, or to make secure. And yes, absolutely about the idolatry, Brika. That's exactly what we can make our doctrine. This is not about intellectual assent, aman, but a kind of grounding that impacts the actions of the person rather than the doctrines of the person. So again, aman is part of our being, and then that manifests in part of our doing. But it is not a list. So just like we read in the very beginning of our time together in John, the Hebrew language uses the meaning of its letters to make up a word. The word isn't its own identity. It's the sum of all these letters, the sum of its parts. We actually don't have that same concept in English. So for some of us, it takes us a while to really start tracking with the Hebrew language. For instance, in English, the word ton, like a measurement of weight, and the word not, like no, have no connections whatsoever, even though they have the same 3 letters. But if that was the Hebrew language, it totally would. Ryan's saying grounding. Yes, absolutely. Faith or belief is grounding. And also he's saying the definition of believe assumes a larger force. Absolutely. So when we explore Amon's meaning, we see it connected through a parent root. Now that parent root, which is the core root of it, it's the parent, makes a bunch of what they call child roots, which is a bunch of other words that come from the parent roots. And all the other child roots come out of the parent root. This is the way the Hebrew language is. So the word Amon is actually from the parent root mun. And the very first time we see this parent root is in Genesis 1:11. Now I want you to take a look at this and how far away it is from a belief system. This root of the word believe, Amon. Genesis 1:11 says, yielding fruit after its kind. And that word for kind, none, mun. So the word that we get faith from or belief from is from the word kind, the same kind, yielding fruit after its kind. There isn't anything related to a mental activity. It's simply an uncontrollable life force that comes from a seed. We see the Hebrew word mun in other verses in the same chapter with the story of creation, connecting to all of the world sort of grouping together. They are part of a thing. All the different animals are part of a thing. And actually, that's an important element in the root of believe. And isn't it funny how to be part of a thing is actually at the root of believe? But what we see in the organized religion or the Western church is the actual separation from others. It's the opposite of what this root word means. There are 3 interesting child roots. These are words that come from mun with the exact same spelling, but they're interpreted into different Hebrew meanings. Hey, Andy and Lisa, great to see you guys. So this is cool because what happens is that a Hebrew word can have the same spelling, but because of the vowels that they may be put in there, or the way they say it, it has a different meaning, but it connects to the same word. Okay, Hebrew language is very different. So when we look at the word Aman, okay, we see this up here, and we're going to try to zoom in on this a little bit because there's a lot on this card. Aman, the same word for believe, has 3 words that are spelled the exact same way. The first word that's spelled the exact same way is the word nurse. And again, we're going to see what all these 3 words have in common with the word believe. They're all in this imagery. Faith shouldn't be divisive. Absolutely, Nandi. Because faith is love, and even if there's differences of opinion, that doesn't divide. God is never about division as we see it here. He is always about unity, because hopefully truth does that when it's shared in love. Ruth 4:16, Naomi took the child, it says, laid it on her breast and became its nurse. So if you remember this story in Ruth, Ruth has a baby, and the mother-in-law, Naomi, takes the child and lays it on her breast and became its nurse. Some people think that meant literally that the grandmother became a nurse, actually nursing the baby as well. But we don't have to know that for sure. We just know that the word nurse is Aman, believe. So what is a nurse, and what does it have in common with the word believe or faith? What does a nurse do? It tends to another helpless life in order to keep them alive and in health. It loves them. It comforts them. It encourages them. It protects them. The word nurse is the same exact word as the word believe. And you can see how they have that in common. The second word is found in 2 Samuel 7:16, and it's translated establish. So the word aman is translated in this version, complete Jewish version, as secure. And 2 Samuel 7:16 says, thus your house and your kingdom will be made secure, aman, forever before you. Your throne will be set up forever. So the word here for aman means secure. The same exact letters for believe means secure. So what makes a kingdom and a house secure? This is the grouping of like kinds for continual life. It resists any opposition that wants to tear down the house where people are living, because it has a strength. It's established. This word is used in Isaiah 22:23 for a nail that is fastened to a secure aman place. So we see the meaning of this word also means secure. And the last one is the word artisan. Song 7:1, there's a dude that is really into his lady. And he uses a lot of very graphic, romantic, sexual expressions about what he's feeling about his woman, okay? And here is one part of the text that says, how beautiful are your feet in sandals, you daughter of princes. The curves of your thighs are like a necklace made by a skilled, it says craftsman here, but it's the word aman. Same thing. The word for belief is also translated as artisan or craftsman. It is the expert artist who assembles together to form a thing of beauty. Isn't it amazing that these three words are the exact same spelling and come from the same root as aman? So let's look at these concrete images, because all of these images and all of these concepts are so different than the linear list of beliefs that we're told we have to ascribe to in order to be a follower of Yeshua. Believe looks like a pillar or a foundation that stands firm and resists the opposition of destruction for the purpose of housing others. Believe looks like a nurse who supports and feeds and comforts and heals and believes. Believe looks like a craftsperson who assembles using their expertise to make something beautiful that others can see God in. I want to take a look at this verse that is oftentimes used to say this is what you have to believe. And now I want to insert what we know the word for believe, aman, all of these images swirling around in our head right now. I want to insert those images into this very familiar verse. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only and unique son, so that everyone who trusts, and that connects with the Hebrew word aman, in him may have eternal aionios, which this is a really cool Greek word. What it means is without beginning or end. So let me read that. In him may have a life without beginning or end. Now, that'll make your head explode right now. But this is the concept of eternal, right? So those who trust aman in this way will have a life without beginning or end. Love gave the Son. Ryan is saying it's as if every time the root is used, they're showing us different attributes of the Creator. Good point. That is a really good point. Because every time it's used, we are seeing different faces of the Lord. That's amazing. Love gave the Son as being planted in the world. the world, this fluid, fierce, chaotic life we're in, love gave the Son. Whoever Aman stands as established in the life of a community stands firm and takes care of, creating things that bring life and produces after its own kind, will have a life without beginning or end. It is not about creeds, and doubts is absolutely not the enemy. Frederick Buechner said, without somehow destroying me in the process, how could God reveal himself in a way that would leave no room for doubt? If there were no room for doubt, there would be no room for me. That's so good. When God does this with us, of course he creates room for doubt. Because if there were no room for doubt, there would be no room for us. So what does belief look like? These images of pillars and nursing and strength and seed and life and fluidity. It looks like a few guys that brought their friend to be touched by Yeshua to be healed because he was sick. And when they couldn't get close enough to him, they hauled this guy up on top of a roof and they made a hole in it and they lowered him down in order for him to be touched by Yeshua. Belief always looks like doing love. We're going to close this time with the lighting of the Shabbos candles. And traditionally, the mothers light the candles, the Shabbos candles, that represent the Sabbath light of peace, of joy, and of unity. And then the tradition is she encircles her hand 3 times around the light, which is a symbol of welcoming in the Sabbath. And then typically she prays as she covers her eyes, which is a symbol of ending all of the work for the week. Blessed are you, Yahweh our God, King of the universe, who has set us apart by his commandments and who has given us Yeshua the Messiah and has sent us to be a light to the world. The Lord is our light and our salvation. May his light be felt in this space as the enlightenment of truth and the radiance of joy. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.